Hello everybody and welcome to the second attempt, I have to be honest here, of me trying to make this video. In the background you will be able to see just normal gameplay of my final F1 2021 league race, but you can honestly ignore this. And welcome to F1 22 everybody, even though I'm not on the F1 22 game yet because I'm just like a normal person. And this is going to be an F1 setup predictions guide where I will be going through all all physics and physics changes Codemasters have implemented and how they will affect each and every part of the setup, and how I'm thinking, or rather hoping, the setups will turn out to develop while making some educated guesses. Of course, the big disclaimer first is that I don't want you guys to hop in there in the game, just take over these settings and try to madly find the setups out. No. The big first step when approaching a new game is to always learn the new physics first. So it's going to be important that you guys spend a lot of time just driving around, doing whatever, preferably of course in the equal cars, so it's at least in like the league racing conditions. So you get to know the handling, get to know the physics before you even start touching the setups. So I'm guessing you should use like this preset setups for at least a week, maybe two. But I'm gonna ignore all of that and gonna talk about what I think we might be seeing after that first or second week. Starting out with Aerodynamics, where we probably have the biggest change of them all, or rather the biggest two changes. First of all, as I'm sure most people are aware, Codemasters have opened up the presets. So previously we've had the choice between 1 to 11 wings, and 1 to 11 wings were different in Baku and to Spa, or Spa and Monaco for example. Now, Codemasters have given us access to all wing settings possible, from 0 to 50. This is going to have a large impact on flexibility and individuality, of course, given that there's now less difference between the individual wing settings, or rather, there's more difference possible within the setups. Additionally to that, they've added bottoming out to the game via the ground effect as well. The ground effect, as some of you may know, means that more of the car's grip will not come from the front splitter, the front wing, but rather from the floor of the car. This is of course going to play a large role in the aerodynamics and how they work. To summarize it, basically, front wing will have a lower impact on our general cornering compared to F1 2021, but it will also have a lower impact on straight line speed compared to the rear wing in 22. Also important to mention is that they have added bottoming out, which means that if you run too high wings, there will be a hard cap the car will hit and reach, and you cannot go over that speed before the end of the straight. I think especially this hard cap is going to be crucial in deciding how you will be able to set up your car. Depending on which speeds you can reach in quali, this will determine how much wings you will want to run. In general, cars are also deemed to be more understeery in the new game. So I'm expecting us to run relatively low wings in general, to be able to have some good rotation with the lowering and some good top speed as well. For tracks like Silverstone, Japan and Spa, I'm still expecting the inverted wing settings that we know from F1 21, but I'm also expecting other tracks like Monaco and Baku, where we have lots of slow corners, where traction is far more important and the front wing doesn't add so much. Okay, not as much Monaco, but mainly Baku as an example. Where we'll see the traditional like 10-20 wings, for example, for Baku. So in general, a bit lower wings. Rear wing will have a larger impact on straight line speed, but front wing will also have a smaller impact on cornering, especially in lower speed corners it will do less. Transmission has also received a large change in that they've added a realistic minor delay between you putting the throttle down and it being transferred to the in-game car. This of course makes it a bit more realistic and a bit more safe, to be honest. Combine that to another massive physics change is the way tires behave and how the loss of grip behaves in the new game. To explain this, basically Codemasters have explained it that they've added multiple additional layers of grip loss, so that that part is more refined now. And they've also mentioned that if you lose the grip, you're going to lose it much more quickly and much more radically, as we see absolute mayhem going on in the background. What this means is that if you get a snap, it will be extremely hard to catch it, and it's going to cost you a lot more time compared to the 21 games. However, small oversteer can still be easily dealt with. This opens up the door for running lower transmission settings compared to 21. 22 to 21, 100% off diff was the best, because we could avoid oversteers entirely and correct the snaps anyway. In 22, with 100 on-throttle diff, not only will it be too understeery, but we'll be also unable to correct the snaps 100% off diff might produce. So it is more important to run a lower on-throttle diff, I think, in 22 game compared to 21. I'm expecting something between the lowest setting, which is 50, and around 70 to 80% on other tracks, and I'm expecting it to rise again if we start to incorporate our own setups, which will become more aggressive than the preset setups, obviously. Off-throttle diff, I believe, is basically unchanged and largely unaffected by all of the graphics changes, so I'm expecting to have very similar values to the F1 21 game, so I will just skip over this and moving on. The suspension geometry and how it works has also been unchanged. If you are looking for a way to describe it, I've described it in a couple of my videos. You can watch it back in the F1 21, or I always recommend James Baldwin's F1 setup series, and there are plenty of other great video guides out there that explain how the camber and how the toe work. I do believe, however, that the physics change, and that we lose traction now easier if we do lose it, but we will have a generally higher grip standard, aka more understeer. That will have an effect on how we want to set up camber and toe. So I am expecting that maybe a touch of rear toe can add and remove some of the absurd snapping that one can expect from the new F1 22 cars. If rear toe does have that kind of advantage, I do expect us to be running a bit of that. I do also expect us to maybe run 1 or 2 clicks as front toe, like in the F1 21 game, to balance out the car if we found good other settings. I am fully expecting to run very high front camber settings again, probably right, due to the fact that the cars are understeery, especially on change of direction, so we will want to get that from the camber as well. Rear camber, I think, does have potential, though I've not seen much rear locking, so I don't see much point in adding it because of that, only because of straight traction. But then again, I think there are other easier options by driving and by setup style to fix that, so I don't think we will see much of rear camber, unless running no rear camber makes the car truly undrivable, which can be the case. They might have incorporated the physics in a way that I'm just talking rubbish, and that running fully right and fully left will be way too aggressive. But based on the fact that it should be unchanged from the 21 game in terms of how it works, I don't think we're gonna see large differences in this department. This is very much unlike the suspension part, where I'm expecting us to have another huge rework. Due to the ground effect that is introduced, cars being stiffer in general and having way less traction, and us wanting to run lower wings, especially running less rear wing, will be more profitable now, because it has a far bigger impact on straight line speed and still has the advantage of higher ERS. I do believe that we will want to run a lot more passive suspension compared to 21. 21, you can get away with running 1.6 on basically every track, or 1.7 in terms of suspension and roll bars. I do think that that part is gone. I'm expecting us to run a lot more stiffer front suspension, for example, to keep the car pinned down when turning into a corner, and keeping it stable in the mid part of the corner to avoid these snaps. I am expecting us to run a bit of rear roll bars as well, of course, to make the car not feel too small. I think we're probably gonna start out with some inverted suspension and roll bar settings on some tracks where we want to use a lot of front wing and rear wing. I'm probably gonna go back to some more traditional suspension and roll bar values on tracks like Baku, where we cannot get that rotation from the front wing. So I'm expecting us to have a rather large difference between the tracks, as you can already see, in terms of suspension and aerodynamic values, which I think is more realistic compared to the last game, and which I also think is going to make this a whole lot more interesting. So in general, I think suspension and roll bars are going to be more stiff, especially on the front. I don't think we can allow to run one roll bar or suspension on the front anymore. I don't think that's going to be a thing. Ride height is going to be a very interesting topic. This is going to be something, based on what I've seen so far, is that it seems more difficult, especially for the front tires, to take and ride some curbs or even touch them. So in order to do that, we will probably want to raise the front ride height. Now I'm uncertain if they've raised the general ride height, for example, because that could also be a thing. That means that we would not need to run as much rear ride height as last game. So rear ride height will be basically defined by the part when you're bottoming out in the corner, which will lead to an instant spin in terms of rear ride height, and front ride height if you're able to take the curves that you should be able to take. There will of course be some curves that you will be unable to take in the new game. That's going to be important to mention. And this is just something that we will have to learn over time, and I'm expecting there to be some clear-cutter settings like 2021 that will crystallize out relatively quickly. I'm expecting like after a month maximum, probably a week or two. And everybody's gonna run those and say, yeah, this is obviously the best, because it allows us to ride curves well enough while being low enough in terms of center of gravity. Keep in mind, lower ride height in general is better, while avoiding us completely spinning out instantly because of ride height. With that suspension part done, I'm gonna quickly move over to the brakes, say that it is completely unchanged compared to 21, that we will still use 100% brake pressure and 50% brake bias, and move on with that. Now moving on to the tire pressures, they are relatively unchanged in terms of their behavior from what I've seen, apart from the fact that they will now have an effect on how you take the curbs. This is, I think, going to be also a defining factor for the tire pressures, and it remains to be seen as if softer tire pressures will help us ride curbs or if it will make it more difficult. I'm certainly excited for that, because it could make running softer tire pressures in the race more favorable if you want to ride curbs better with heavy fuel, for example. This is something that remains to be seen, something to be tested, and something I will report on. Now, to summarize, aerodynamics in a fast shootout. Lower wings probably, rear wing has a bigger effect now, front wing has a smaller effect now, both to straight line speed and to cornering speed. On-throttle transmission, probably lower, has been reworked to have a minor realistic delay. Off-throttle transmission, largely unchanged. Suspension geometry, unchanged in how it works compared to last game, but of course affected by the entire physics rework. Suspension, unchanged basically how it works, but of course massively affected and changed most likely because of the physics rework. Expect stiffer settings on the front here and more passive settings in general. Ride height now more important due to bottoming out, same as aerodynamics. I expect ride height and aerodynamics to be the two most important settings of any setup now. Those you will want to get right first. Brakes unchanged, tire pressures largely unchanged, and I'm pretty sure that's pretty much the end of it. I thank everybody for listening. I intend to do these type of videos with like these updates probably every 1 to 2 weeks at the start, and then probably every couple of months later, depending on how the setup meta starts to develop, when we start to see the first couple setups, what is important to note about league racing, stuff like that. As always, hope you enjoyed, leave a like, and don't subscribe. Actually, wait, no, you can, but see ya, bye bye.